Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we get into anything else, I hope you'll consider subscribing, especially if you've been with me for a while and haven't yet. Please watch to the end of the video, and if you found it interesting or learned something, do give it a like and help your older sister out with the algorithm. Okay, now let's get to the actual video. I wasn't going to make any video for April or even May because I've been so busy with work and I'm also traveling a lot for family and social obligations. I also have about 4 videos in the pipeline that I really want to focus on, and I was thinking of doing a poll on the community tab about which one you guys would like to see first. Then I was idly scrolling on Twitter and this video came up on my timeline.
Can you please say free Palestine one time? Why did you kill that lady? You killed that lady and got no jail time? No jail time, Alec? No jail time, Alec. You're putting innocent people in jail, Alec Baldwin. Free Palestine, Alec, just one time, and I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you alone, I swear. Just say free Palestine one time. One time. One time.
Call the police.
One time, Alec. You know he's a criminal. You know he's a fucking criminal. Come on, Alec. Just say free Palestine one time. One time. Just one time. Please. And I'll leave you alone. Free Palestine. Fuck Israel. Fuck Zionism. Please say it. One time.
Could you do me one quick favor?
Now, this video was captioned, "White Devil Alec Baldwin attacked me while I was trying to get coffee." There is a community note that appears to have been updated several times. For now, it reads,
Alec Baldwin has not been convicted of any crime yet. Clearly, he is being harassed in the footage, and depending upon what state he is in, he may be within his rights to remove the phone from his harasser. The post wording is also racist and will be reported.
In a statement given to Newsweek, the person filming the video identified themselves as Crackhead Barney, a performance artist whose statement reads,
My performance art and confrontational media is a statement about the double standards of society in the U.S. As the U.S. supports Israel in the genocide of Palestinians, here at home, powerful people maintain a facade of politeness and dignity while we export death and terror around the world. Amid mass protests and public calls for an end to U.S. support of Israel, the entertainment industry has been largely silent, and in some cases, even supportive of Israel's genocide. This cannot stand, and people deserve to be confronted with the horrors our nation funds and supports. I stand with the movement for Palestinian liberation and the end of the apartheid state of Israel as we know it. Free Palestine, end the occupation, end the settlements, and end U.S. imperialism.
As of writing of this script, we haven't heard from Alec Baldwin about this incident, which is fine. I don't think anything he might say will have much bearing on my personal reaction to all of this. So strap in because there is a lot to unpack. So let's start with a basic premise. Performance artists are weird. I'd probably be stoned at my university if I dared to proclaim that as a student back in the day. Now, an extremely loud and obnoxious and overfunded department would probably drag me on social media and call for my donations to be returned. But as this is my YouTube space and not my alma mater, I don't care. I'll say it. Performance artists are weird and annoying. They're meant to be. Their entire job is to freak people out to get them to think. My earliest exposure to one was this Dutch performance artist named Tinkerbell, who in 2004 snapped her pet cat's neck and turned it into a handbag. She later managed to get a bunch of male chicks, as in baby chickens, to an eco-design fair in Amsterdam, where she told people that if they didn't buy them from her by the end of the day, she'd dump them into a shredder. By the end of the day, she'd sold only 9. But when she went to shred the remaining 51, she found that someone had stolen her shredder. So, like a normal person, she announced that she would just kill the 51 chicks by bashing them against the wall. According to her, it got really tense at that fair, and an organizer stepped in to buy the remaining 51 chicks so that things calmed down. That evening, the police arrested her for violating the Dutch animal welfare law and held her for 5 hours. Now, let's look past the irritation and ignore the impulse to just write this person off as an attention-seeking psycho. What was she trying to say? Well, Tinkerbell is an animal rights activist because of course she is. Nothing says animal rights like killing your own pet cat and trying to shred baby chickens, right? But seriously, I am a very reluctant fan of this bitch because you have to admire the extremes she's willing to go to call out people's hypocrisy when it comes to consuming meat. So with respect to her cat, why are cats special? Why are we so horrified by the prospect of her using her pet, whom she claimed was dying anyway, as material for a bag? Why are we okay when we're talking cows, pigs, and goats, but when we start talking baby seals, horses, cats, and dogs, suddenly there's outrage? As for the chicks, she apparently acquired them from a factory farm that hatches hundreds of thousands of eggs a week. When she learned that approximately 300,000 chicks were killed a week because they were male and therefore incapable of laying eggs or being fattened up, she decided to buy 5 dozen. These chicks were already marked for death before she'd bought them, and her point in threatening to shred those not sold was that we enable an industry where what isn't profitable is killed, except on a much bigger scale. While she was arrested for her performance, she was not actually charged for it, as far as I recall, and I completely understand why the case wasn't brought to court, because then the prosecutor would have to test the limits of the animal welfare law. Think about it. If you're not okay with what she tried to do to 51 chicks at the end of one day, why are you okay with the factory down the road killing hundreds and thousands more? I have a few other favorite performance artists, and when I look into why I like them, they really know how to push boundaries in probably pretentious but still meaningful ways. For example, I like Yoko Ono. Yes, really. While obviously I didn't participate in her cut piece 1964, I know enough about it to know that it's genius. She'd sit and let her audience members take a pair of scissors up and snip at her clothing, piece by piece, until she was completely naked. The audience would get to keep the pieces of fabric they'd cut, and there were no limits on how big or small each piece would be. And just picture that in your head, being handed a pair of scissors and told you can cut off a piece of the performer's clothing. If the guy before you snipped off a whole sleeve, do you follow suit? If she's almost naked, do you cut off a smaller piece because you don't want to be the one who renders her nude? Or is it the opposite? Do you want to be the one who renders her nude? All the while, she doesn't react, doesn't protest. I mean, reading about that for the first time in university, it triggered all sorts of thoughts about how society views and treats women. For a more hardcore performance that goes into what people are capable of when there are no consequences for their actions, look up Marina Abramovich's 1974 performance, Rhythm Zero. I would jump into it now, but I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I feel like I've started to digress already because by now, you should understand my basic premise about performance artists. They're weird. They're annoying. They're supposed to challenge you even if they offend and horrify, because forcing you to contemplate and sort out something that makes you uncomfortable is ultimately meaningful. Now, is that what we saw happen in that video with Alec Baldwin? I'm not an expert in art, as I've explained before, but watching that video and reading Miss Crackhead Barney's statement, I don't see it as performance art. Now, of course, she might argue that my failure to appreciate her performance doesn't change the fact that it was a performance, but I've watched that video over a dozen times now, and I've had a few days to think about it, and I'm not seeing what's supposed to be meaningful about shouting at and haranguing an actor until he says, "Free Palestine." I saw a confrontation in that video, but as much as I tried to winnow out what she meant to do in a broader context that fits what she was talking about in her later statement to Newsweek, I'm just not seeing the connection. So let's break it down. Yes, only a handful of people in the entertainment industry in the United States have been vocally supportive of ending the occupation of Palestine. What's shocking to me is the number of activist celebrities who cannot even outright condemn the slaughter of civilians, whether Palestinian or Israeli. Yes, it's a complicated situation, but it should not be hard to say that indiscriminate killing is wrong and needs to stop. Yes, it is aggravating that some people with money and influence who pretend to care when it's profitable apparently aren't doing anything to help the millions of people affected by this crisis. They just go about their comfortable and privileged lives, shrouded in their supposed virtue, because it's just too much of a personal and professional risk to say or do something. Yes, people shouldn't get to ignore what's funded by their government abroad. Or, as Miss Crackhead Barney says, people deserve to be confronted with the horrors our nation funds and supports. That is all very clear, but what I'm not seeing is how this message is illustrated by harassing Alec Baldwin. Maybe Miss Barney confronted him with silence, sure, and maybe if this video had ended in her asking, "Why can't you say Free Palestine?" then we'd be having a different conversation. But that's not what happened. Miss Barney is apparently known for being an ambush interviewer, but even if that's the metric we're using to judge what happened, it's still disconnected from her high-minded purpose. She demanded he say the words, mockingly cajoled him when he wouldn't, and then brought up his unrelated upcoming trial for manslaughter by asking him, "Why did you kill that lady?" She then accused him of putting innocent people in jail, claimed that he got away with no jail time despite his trial still pending, and called him a criminal while still demanding he say, "Free Palestine." She wasn't talking to him to get honest answers. She was trying to provoke a hostile reaction. Otherwise, she wouldn't have brought up Alec Baldwin's upcoming trial. It's honestly not that different from paparazzi harassing celebrities to get a photo, then turning around and suing when the celebrities lash out. Even if they don't sue, they get to take photos of the celebrities having an absolute meltdown. Think Britney Spears in 2007. This view of Miss Barney's actual motives is reinforced by the fact that when she tweeted her video, she claimed that Alec Baldwin attacked her while she was getting coffee, as if it was a case of, "Oh my god, it happened out of nowhere. This white devil just popped up and attacked me for no reason." There's no need to be disingenuous and try to make him look bad. It's not like Alec Baldwin has the best reputation, especially lately. Unless Miss Barney's performance art is parodying activists as unhinged and irrational liars, I'm just not getting it. Her appearance on Piers Morgan seems to underscore that. Like, she can't be a serious person. Like, you can dress it up and try to reframe it in retrospect, ma'am, but what appears to have happened was that you saw a celebrity who hasn't said anything about the slaughter in Gaza, and you decided to confront them for the clicks. Even if she was earnestly trying to talk to him about his silence on Gaza, which again, it doesn't seem to be the case. It's brave and it's certainly provocative, but it's not art. Ever since October 7th, people have been wising up to celebrities whose activism is performative. And I think most people don't need their favorite celebrity to say something in order to have an opinion. All around the world, people are protesting what's happening in Gaza and their governments and corporations' participation in it. Nothing new or profound was uncovered by that interaction between Alec Baldwin and Crackhead Barney. She just wanted to attack him, and whether that is warranted or not, I don't know that it helps. If she had actually gotten him to say, "Free Palestine," first of all, would any one of us consider that statement sincere, considering the build-up to that statement? If Crackhead Barney ran up to you on the street, no context, shoved a phone in your face and asked you, "Excuse me, can you say Free Palestine?" and you said the words, is that honestly as meaningful as actually showing up to a protest, or sending money for aid, or taking the time to think about what you want to say? In my opinion, no, it isn't. Because the odds are, the person who says the words already believes that Palestine should be free, so you're preaching to the choir, or they'd be someone who just wants you to get out of their face. Even Miss Barney seems to understand that the latter is more likely because she repeatedly tells Alec Baldwin in that video, "Please just say it one time. Just one time and I'll leave you alone." She just wants him to say it. She doesn't actually care if he means it. And she capitalizes on the knowledge that he probably won't say the words. So let me ask, does it actually help to bully people into saying Free Palestine? Now, when I scrolled down to read the replies to Miss Barney's video and tweet, I saw a number of people writing that she was, quote, compelling speech. Again, I don't think that's what happened because I don't think anything in that video from her end was sincere. I don't think she was earnestly trying to get anything out of him about Gaza. If anything, and this is me doing my best to really try and understand what point she might have been trying to make, I think she was trying to highlight how committed some people are to being silent on this matter. More likely, she knew Alec Baldwin wouldn't say Free Palestine. And by pressing him to do so, she knew she would upset him and get a reaction. Again, honestly, if she'd kept it to that instead of bringing up the manslaughter trial, it would have been painfully clear that some people would rather endure bizarre theatrics from a screaming activist than admit that Palestine should be free. Holy wow, did I just understand Crackhead Barney as a performance artist? Palestine should be free. Palestine should be free. Okay, I guess I'll have to think on it more. I honestly don't think we'll be getting anything coherent out of Miss Barney to help us understand her more, so I'm just going to let it sit for a while. But what I will do now is clarify that her demanding people say Free Palestine is not compelling speech. It's certainly annoying, but it is not a human rights violation. First things first, when we're talking about human rights violations, we're generally talking about violations by the state. So unlike most crimes where the perpetrator is an individual and fellow citizen, when we are talking about human rights violations, the violator, the perpetrator, is the state and its agents. So when we talk about compelled speech, we're talking about the state requiring speech under threat of punishment. In the United States, one of the seminal cases is West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, where the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to compel public school children to salute the flag and pledge allegiance. Bear in mind that the penalty for failure to comply was expulsion. It must be undeniably stressful to be yelled at by a random stranger into saying Free Palestine, but the stakes are hardly the same, are they? You're hardly feeling the full weight of institutional authority bearing down on you and trying to squeeze the words from your throat when you're faced with someone like Crackhead Barney. It's just not the same. If anything, in the context of the US, I would argue that the compelled speech goes the other way. What am I talking about? Well, in 2018, I read an article in The Intercept about how a Palestinian speech pathologist in Texas lost her job because she refused to sign an addendum to her contract. This addition to her contract was deemed necessary pursuant to a law Texas passed in 2017, which bars the state from entering into contracts with those who boycott Israel. This was in response to the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, or the BDS movement, which I don't have time to get into now, but which essentially was formed as a response to the even then worsening treatment of Palestinians by the State of Israel. Anyway, Bahia Amawi, the speech pathologist, saw that as part of her contract, she had to sign off on the following clause. Pursuant to Section 2270.001 of Texas Government Code, the contractor affirms that it 1. Does not currently boycott Israel, and 2. Will not boycott Israel during the term of the contract. As a Palestinian who had family in the West Bank, of course Ms. Amawi couldn't sign, and despite being contracted for the school for 9 years, the school board couldn't make an exception for her because of the law. She had to swear that she would not boycott Israel, and because she wouldn't, she lost her job. Ms. Amawi sued, and I've linked a copy of her suit in the references and in the description, as per usual. But she's just one of several people who have begun bringing suit against the states that have passed similar legislation. As far as I know, 38 states have passed legislation of this kind, but that number could go higher. If you're in the mood for more media on this topic, I do recommend you look up the documentary Boycott, which was released in 2021 and which I only found last month because I was looking for updates on Ms. Amawi's case. Turns out, Ms. Amawi won her suit and was awarded $140,000. Moreover, the state of Texas amended their law so that it would not apply to individuals like her. And while there was a temporary injunction on the law, she was able to sign her contract without the problematic clause in it. Meanwhile, the American Civil Liberties Union has been fighting similar laws and has seen some success in places like Arizona and Kansas. A federal judge also struck down an anti-boycott law in Georgia on the grounds that it was unconstitutional, compelled speech. Bear in mind that these rulings have been appealed, and in March of last year, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review an appeal of a decision out of Arkansas, where a lower court upheld an Arkansas law requiring an oath not to boycott Israel. This doesn't mean that the Supreme Court thinks it's okay to force people to promise not to boycott. It just means that it doesn't want to answer that question right now. I'll leave it to you to guess why. Bear in mind, punishing people for boycotting Israel doesn't just happen in the United States. France criminalized boycotts of Israel way back in 1977. Et alors, in 2009, a group of BDS activists inevitably tested this law by staging a protest outside of a grocery store and handing out flyers calling for the boycott of Israeli products. They were eventually convicted, but appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, which in Baldassi and others versus France 2020, unanimously ruled that it was a violation of the right to freedom of expression to prohibit and punish boycotts. What makes the United States unique is that in many of these anti-BDS state legislations, the state is making people promise not to boycott. And that forced promise is precisely what we are talking about in compelled speech. At this point, it remains to be seen whether the U.S. Supreme Court will relent and rule on whether a forced promise not to boycott is compelled speech. But the reason we've come down this path is because I hope it's clear to you, dear viewer, that while much can be said about Miss Crackhead Barney, she wasn't compelling speech. Okay, so we've covered performance art, we've covered the pointlessness of trying to force entertainers to join your cause, we've covered compelled speech. Yeah, I think we've got it. I'm curious to know your thoughts about that interaction though. It was a lot, wasn't it? Again, I'm out for the rest of April and the whole of May, but I hope you'll check my next video out when it does come up, and until then, like, comment, subscribe, take care of yourselves. Bye!